Hey, it's Soleil, and this is episode 115 of the Orange Pill Investor. And today I want to talk about trading covered calls with MicroStrategy, a little bit of SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, some of the pros and cons, and definitely some dangers to be aware of. We'll talk about a regular margin account, and I will also show you what can happen in an IRA account if you are a little overconfident. Not the end of the world, but I ended up getting my, long story short, I ended up getting my 100 shares of MicroStrategy called away in my IRA because they only allow defined risk trades to begin with. So I kind of had to resort to poor man's covered calls in order to continue to generate yield. So we'll go over all of that, but in general, as you can see, what I do is I try to build at least, and this is for any stock, try to build at least 10 or 20% of callaway value. And callaway value is the difference between the current share price and the strike that you picked. And it's called the callaway value because if the price of the stock exceeds the strike, then those shares will get called away, meaning the other guy's going to pay you for them and take your shares at the agreed upon price. So if that happens on this 1320, and I'm kind of not real happy about that one because it was a week early when I actually made this trade, and the price was 1100. So already 10% of my 20% callaway value is gone. And you can even see if I wanted to close this trade now, I got paid $1,345 for it, but I would have to pay probably the mid price in between here, so like 2,800. So more than double than what I paid for it. Now, however, if MicroStrategy expires at right where it is today on next week, then this value will be zero, and I'll just pay like $5 or something to roll it to next week. I went ahead and selected. I did these rolls on Friday, and the price was already around 1,200. So I built another 200-ish callaway value into each of these. And then I think I did something a little stupid. I was like, okay, because I had been burned before, and I'll get to the story. But I think I had like 1,200. Let's go right to the threats. So when MicroStrategy pumped all the way down here, I had sold the 1040 strike. And then a week later, I am closing it, and you can see here that I had to sell 100 shares because I did not have, the price had pumped to like 1,400 a share, I believe. And so I had to pay $364 to close this 1050. And when I say I had to pay $364, I mean options are times 100. So I had to pay $36,400. Now I only got paid whatever, a couple grand for this or something. So you can see that I ended up having to sell 100 shares to cover that. And I still had, 100 shares the next week because I think I started with 200 or something. And so I did profit some, but that's the weakness of selling covered calls is that your unlimited upside is capped now. It's no longer unlimited. However, so the next week I was able to sell a covered call at the 1590 strike, and I don't even remember what MicroStrategy was trading for around this time. I probably baked another 10% call away in there, so it was probably trading at like 1400. And so if you want to say I paid 36 and I got 10,000 back, then this trade cost me 25 grand. And I didn't really lose 25 grand. It's just 25 grand that I had to pay in order to continue trading MicroStrategy. If I just wanted to call it quits and sell the shares and that be the end of it, then, that's fine. But so that is the risk. And that's exactly what happened in this IRA. So I think, yeah, here we go. This cost me, to close this 1100 strike, cost me $67,000. So I actually had to sell 100 shares, which was the only 100 shares I had. And so you can see what's left over. I didn't want to stop trading MicroStrategy, but when MicroStrategy is over $1,000 a share and you don't have $100,000 in a IRA, this is a traditional IRA, what I had to do was end up forming a poor man's covered call. So I went out to closer to a year is probably better, but this was probably not quite a year, the January 17 of 2025. And I went out here and I paid $67,000 for an 1100 strike call. And since I can use this as collateral now to sell covered calls against, I've been able to continue to sell covered calls every week since then. And I sold this one this week on Friday for $980. And that wasn't quite enough to pick up an extra share, I don't think. I can't remember. Oh, I can just check the activity. So the last time I bought a share was on 429. But why is it saying I bought one and then sold one? I don't remember what the hell I was doing. All right. So 419, I bought another share MicroStrategy. I got paid $1,300 for selling the 1650 strike, and so I purchased a share. The other thing I like actually trading in the IRA, you do pay the fees or whatever, but I like being able to just buy something, close it, take profits. So I do a metric ass ton more kind of trading in and out of things in my IRA than I would normally do because there's just no tax consequences. So I just love that. And so generally this is what I'll do. If I sell a covered call, get at least 1% of whatever the stock's value is, it's going to be able, it's going to let me buy one share of that stock. So that's generally what I do. But in this case, it looks like maybe I just couldn't quite afford it. So I bought a bunch of, just get rid of that. I bought a bunch of HUT instead. I had just enough money to get to another 100 shares of HUT, so I was able to sell 2 covered calls in HUT. So that's my strategy, is to sell a covered call every week, pick up an extra share, and what I'm hoping eventually is that not only will I have this leaps that will be of some value, and just constantly, picking up a share a week maybe. And so it would take like 2 years to get 100 freaking shares of MicroStrategy. But that is one scenario that can be done if you actually price yourself out of a stock. You can still create a synthetic stock with a deep in the money leaps. This isn't quite deep in the money anymore. It was when I bought it. I think it was like at $1,500. So this is way deeper in the money when I bought it. So absolutely, the risks, the threats to trading MicroStrategy is that these calls can, or your shares can get called away. And so how would you protect yourself against that? Well, I've got 13 extra shares that are uncapped. So let's just say I got completely wrecked this week and the price went up to $2,000 again. I would have to pay $700 a share, so 70 grand for this one. I'd have to pay 60 grand for this one, and I'd have to pay 55 grand for this one. Now, my account, especially since this is on margin, my account would grow. This one would grow until it got to 1320, and then it would not continue to grow anymore. My 100 shares that are collateral for the 1400 strike would grow until I got to 1400, and then the same for this one. My account value would grow until these 100 shares reached 1450, and then that's when it would start to go negative. So there's no way in hell I would have 70, 60, and 55, 130, and 55, 185. So if this breaks to $2,000 again, I would be on the hook for, what did I just say, 185 grand? So I would end up having to basically just let 100 of these shares get called away. And even these 13 shares aren't going to save me, because that would be $2,000 a piece. That would be 26 grand. That would basically cover like almost half the cost of one of these. So I could sell those 13 shares. But for sure I would have to sell, I would have to let shares get called away. Basically, I would be selling those shares at the current price, so I would make the 200 grand. And then I could use that 200 grand to roll these two. So I would be fine retaining 200 of my 300 shares. But if losing any of your shares at all just scares you, and you're like, no, I don't want to lose any of my shares ever, then maybe selling covered calls isn't for you. Now, I tried to do something. I tried to add this in for insurance, and I'm going to show you a couple of tools that are very valuable for option sellers. One is Market Chameleon, and the other one is optionsprofitcalculator. Robinhood's got a nice little tool. Like if I say, okay, I sold this, what did I sell? The 1450. So okay, boom. I'm going to sell the 1450, and then I'm going to buy, what did I buy? I bought like the 3000 strike or something stupid. Just for a little bit of insurance. And you can edit the ratio here, and it won't let you go over 9, but I actually did buy 10 of these. I'm just going to pick 9 here, and it's going to change the graph. So if the price of MicroStrategy goes up to 1455, which is the strike price, then we make maximum amount of money here. It's saying 0, but that's stupid, because I would be selling it for, oh no, 9 of these things cost me 270. Yeah, no, I'd be getting a $500 credit. So I'd be making $500 here. But if the price of MicroStrategy goes up to $2,000 by expiration, you can see, like I said, the expected loss is 62 grand. And maximum pain would be MicroStrategy at $3,000, because that's the price of these 9 that I bought. And then it would start to go in the other direction, actually. And if MicroStrategy were to go to some ungodly number by expiration, and these 3000 strike calls become profitable, they get real freaking profitable real quick. So if the price went to like 3,500, you know, I'd make 200 grand or something ridiculous. But the purpose, this is never going to happen. So, I bought these just for a little bit of protection, and you'll see. So, but the failure for Robinhood's graph is this is just all at expiration, and you don't buy calls for what's going to happen at expiration. You buy calls to sell them early. And I am mostly an option call seller, but you can think of the buyers and sellers as opposites. So you want to sell calls that I do 1 week out, but up to 45, max really 60 days to expiration. That's when option value decays very rapidly. And as a seller, that's what I want. I want to sell it sell it high, and then very rapidly I want the price of that option to become less and less and less, so that I can buy it back for cheaper, maybe half price or whatever, or for nothing. So Robinhood's graph, while technically true, is at expiration. And so what I would really be hoping for would be that MicroStrategy would pump on Monday to 2 grand, so like 2040. If MicroStrategy pumped to $2,000.40, then each of my options would now be worth. I paid 32 for them, but now they're worth 1,300. And if I have 10 of them, then that means I got paid 13,000. Now 13,000 still does not offset the 50, 60 grand, but it would just take a little chunk out of it. So I'd still end up having to get those shares called away probably, which in the long run kind of doesn't really bother me, because if I can profit 10-20% a week every week, and my shares are constantly just getting called away, you're still going to be pretty rich pretty freaking fast if you made 10% a week for a year on $100,000 stock. 10 grand a week for the whole year is basically doubling your money. Now I know some of my other irresponsibly long MicroStrategy brothers are like, I don't want to just double up in a year. I want to like 10x. That's what we're all hoping for. So this tool is very helpful to look and see, okay, not just what happens at expiration, because these 3,000 strike calls, while on Monday, if it goes to 2,000, are extremely valuable. If they go to 2,000 on Friday, they're worthless because they're not over 3,000. So that's why I said that when you buy calls, you're not buying calls to hold till expiration. You're buying calls to sell at some point when the price pumps. So that's the purpose of calls. And so if you're selling a call and it's advantageous to sell a call between 5 days to expiration up to like 45 days to expiration, then call buyers really want to buy calls out as far past that as they possibly can. So, I mean, the farthest you can buy MicroStrategy on Robinhood is June 18th, 2026. However, this gets cost frickin' prohibitive. So you can get the 3,800 strike in June 2026 if you want to shell out $27,000. Now let's just take a look, though, at what would happen if we do choose that one. So we go up here on options profit calculator. You pick your symbol. It's going to populate the current price for you. We're going to buying a call. They list it as writing a call. That would be selling. And let's go all the way out to June 18th, 2026. Let's scroll all the way down to the 1,300. We'll select the mid price here. And I like to see it in profit and loss, but you can also do percent. Hit calculate. It's going to give me a big old chart. And so it's not giving me every single week because this chart is too big. But let's just say you bought this $27,000 call option as protection against a MicroStrategy pump, or just because you think it's going to be, you know, whatever, 10 grand by the end of 2025 or something. Well, by May 26th, if you're chugging along and you're selling these covered calls, and then all of a sudden, like, holy crap, the price went up to 2016 by May 26th, this call that you bought, you paid 27 for it, now it's worth 67, so you could sell it and pocket 40. So that would actually take the sting out a hell of a lot more than, you know, than not having it. But it's a hell of a price to pay for insurance, and especially when if you're selling these calls week to week like I do, you're only getting paid, I say only, but at 10% call away value, that would be around $1,400. You could basically get paid 1%. What I normally do is I just take that and I buy a share, and I just go long on an extra share, and I try to just accumulate shares and shares and shares, which is how I ended up with 313 shares. It's just every week I purchase however many shares I can afford to purchase based on how much premium I sold. So it would take, in order to get that 27 grand, you'd have to sell these for what? 10 weeks would get you 14,000, so double that. You'd have to sell for 20 weeks in a row to be able to afford that insurance if you just don't have it on you. It's just not sitting around in cash. So the insurance for the, I mean, but some people just buy those, you know, deep out of the money leaps, period, because they just believe in MicroStrategy. And if that was something that you were already going to buy, then it could be a decent hedge against your strikes getting breached. I'm actually considering doing something similar. I think that these 10 calls that I bought for like $300 or whatever the hell it was, $360, I think this is a waste of money now after having done it. I would really, you know, I would need MicroStrategy to pump till 2 grand, like literally on Monday, in order to even collect the 10 grand on these. So not the wisest use of money here, and I don't think I'll be doing this anymore. But I may consider actually going out, and I don't necessarily have to go all the way out to June. I think January 2026 is fine, because I'm looking to kind of resettle my MicroStrategy holdings between now and end of 2025. Anyway, I will probably be peeling off some MicroStrategy and either pouring it into Tesla if Tesla has not pumped, or literally just straight into Bitcoin. But the January one is only like, well, it's only like 3,000, or no, excuse me, like 5 grand cheaper. So for an extra 5 grand, you can go to June, actually. And that's the thing. You can just kind of look and see. It's probably easier. That's probably, I don't know what's easier to do. All right, the reason I sell weekly calls, you can just look and see. So right at the money, the 1225, just over $6,000, you could get paid at the money. That's not allowing for any call away value. So this is just an example. It's not financial advice ever, but I'm not recommending that anybody sell at the money MicroStrategy calls. That seems probably like a very bad idea. But you would think, okay, if I can get $6,000 at the money for 1 week, I should be able to get $12,000 at the money for 2 weeks. But there's diminishing returns. See, this is not $12,000. It's a little under 10. And then going out another week is going to be diminishing returns again. So this is just under 10. Now it's going from 10 to 10 to 12. So you're only getting an extra $2,000 for this week instead of 6 in 1 week. And let's go here again. So from $12,000 to another $2,000. So every time you go out, the call is becoming much less effective as a seller and more efficient as a buyer. So as a buyer, you kind of want to go out as far as you can possibly humanly afford. And the Greek that you're looking for on these, let me go back over to Robinhood. I like Robinhood because it basically just, the user interface is so simple, and maybe they're saying something about their clientele. But the important Greek for sellers is theta. So this means that $5.43 is draining out of this option contract every day. And that's what you want as a seller. Let's look at the next week. At the money, theta drops down to 3.8. So only $3 is draining out. So that trend is going to continue. Let's go all the way the hell out to June again for the Mamma Jamma. It's going to cost you $63,000 frickin' dollars just for this option at the money. But the beauty of it is only 36 cents is draining out of this a day. So you could hold this for 100 days and only $36 will have dropped out of it. This will still be worth $63,264. So people who buy calls for next week, they're basically just scratching lottery tickets, in my opinion. Now, the exception, I used to be in a little trading group on Clubhouse, shout out to 13th House. And some of them were very good at momentum trading. So if you just look, and that's why I even still have, no, that's SPX. There we go. 52-week highs. So companies that are having 52-week highs can develop a little bit of a fever pitch around them. And if you can ride that momentum, then you can get in a trade and out of a trade probably in the same day and pocket some profits. And so that's the thing. If something expires this Friday and you hold it till Friday, that's almost certainly going to be a loser. I mean, the price really has to go, breach your strike way, way, way above it in order to do that much damage and really profit. So what you're really hoping for is there's a big price movement that day and you can just get in and out of the trade. Now, of course, if you have less than $25,000, you're going to be punished by the day trade rules. And so another kind of fascist rule that they say is to protect people, but all it really does is just hurt people with small accounts. They don't have access to those type of trading strategies. But off the top of my head, that's the only trading strategy to me that makes sense in order to just go out like 1 week. Otherwise, if you're a buyer, you want theta to be as just tiny as possible. And the beauty of it is, I mean, you're paying a shitload of money for this, but the fact that this is so small in comparison means you can hold this for 6 months or a year and lose almost no value. And at the same time, delta is the rate of change in the price per a change in $1 of the stock. And that's why sometimes these are constructed kind of deep in the money. And let's just pick the 900 strike. That should be a pretty high delta. Yeah. So like a 0.83 delta, of course you're paying even more for it, but a 0.83 delta means that for every dollar increase in the price, the price of this option goes up 83 cents. So it's called like a synthetic stock. It's almost acting like owning 100 shares, even though you're only paying $73,000 for the shares as opposed to $120,000. And I say only. But so really, something like this, I'm really going to take a hard look at. I've got enough buying power to do it. And then if this were to pump and maybe double, then I suppose then I could cash it out and buy shares with it. But just as on a level, not dealing with any, buying any calls. If you're just dealing with shares, if you think there's a risk of this doubling up again and going back to $2,000, then you're going to be on the hook for $70,000 here. And if the price is $2,000 and you don't want to lose, you still want to at least have 100 shares to be able to sell more covered calls against, then that $70,000 divided by the $2,000 per share would be 35 shares. So if you have 135 shares of MicroStrategy and it goes to $2,000, you can peel off those 35 shares, sell them for 70, and then use that to pay so that you do not lose your 100 shares. Now, if you think that this could triple and go to, well, actually a true double would be to 2,500. And in that case, you'd need $127,000 divided by 2. Let's do 120. So you'd need 60 shares. You need 160 shares of MicroStrategy if this doubles, and then you'd have to sell 60 shares at 2,400, and then you'd get to keep your 100 shares. So there's no guarantees, but the mental calculations is, okay, how badly, if I'm selling a covered call, how badly do I think MicroStrategy can hurt me? And really, though, would that have been the end of the world? If you had 150 shares of MicroStrategy when it was $1,000 a share, and you sold the 1,500 strike or whatever, and then it went to 2,000, and you had to come off of $50,000. So then you took your 50 shares that are worth 100,000 now, and you sold half of them to pay off that 50,000. That means you sold 25 shares at 2,000, and now the price is back down to 1,000, and you can take that 50 and buy those shares back for half price. So that's the other beauty of selling covered calls, is it kind of just mechanically forces you to sell high without having to wonder whether it's, oh, is it the top, is it the bottom? You have no idea. But if the price was 1,000 and you sold a 1,500 strike for the next week, and then the price goes to 2,000, well, guess what? You're selling high at 1,500. You're still making 50% from 1,000 to 1,500. So, and the other the other side of that is, I bet almost none of the people that I interact with actually sold any MicroStrategy at 2,000. So when people say that I'm capping my upside and I'm not profiting up to here, well, neither are the people who just watch it go to 2 and then watch it go back to 1. You didn't gain this either. Just like if you bought it, if you bought it here at 1,300 and it dropped to 1,000, you didn't lose money there either, unless you panic sold. So you don't book profits until you sell, and you don't book losses until you sell either. So, all the people who were just like, okay, I'm going to buy Lambo because it tripled and went from 600 to freaking 2,000. If none of them sold and booked profits, then they just watched it go down to 1,000, and okay, cool. And they bought it at 6, and now it's 1,000, so now they're up 50%. That's still pretty freaking good, but they didn't have the, you don't have hindsight here. So if you had sold a covered call at 1,800, and they get called away for 2,000, okay, you lost out on 20 grand, but if your cost basis was 1,000 and you sold them for 1,800, that's a pretty good freaking trade. So MicroStrategy terrifies me a little bit more than the average stock. In general, like in this account, this is my small account, Mara and I got rid of my CLSK because I hate anything that options has trades in increments of a nickel. If it's not pennies, it drives me freaking insane. So Mara is a big one. If I was to get priced out of Mara, like if Mara went to $50 a share or something, and I'm like, crap, I don't have enough money to be in Mara anymore, well then I'll just go down here and I trade Riot or Hut. But MicroStrategy is just kind of like, it's almost too precious to really risk losing. So that's why I say, unless MicroStrategy 10x's in a week, I'm not going to lose all of my 300 shares. Even if this pumps to 2 grand or 2,500, then I would just have to peel off 100 shares and cover, and then I'd be selling 2 covered calls for next week. But the other thing is selling covered calls when the price is 2 grand a share. I'm not going to be making 1,300 a week. I'll be making like 2 grand a week on each of these. So that's the beauty of it too. As the price of the stock appreciates, so when you're getting 1% at 1,200, that's 1,200 a week. When the price is 2 grand, you're getting 2 grand a week. And so this reason right here is the reason why I'm technically work optional right now, because this is on 300 shares. This is 3 grand, 4,300. So I'm making 4,300 a week selling covered calls against this. That has now eclipsed my salary, and it eclipsed it quite a while ago. I don't make 4 grand a week at my 9 to 5. That's for damn sure. So I could technically, I've survived like a half dozen layoffs in the last 5 years, but if they get me next time, I would be fine. I could basically call this early retirement or whatever, which also I think is hilarious because a lot of these dividend traders are like, oh, could you retire on 5 million? And I'm like, could I retire on 5 million? I'm like, I could retire on 500,000 easily with a pay increase. Collecting 1% a week on 500,000 is $5,000 a week. That's $250K a year. Like, that's easy mode. But these dividend traders are like, oh, they're going to collect like 1% or something. I don't know how often that happens. 1%, 4 times a year or something. All the dividends trade differently, I guess. And I got to look up. There's one I'm actually somewhat interested in, MSTY. It looks like a ridiculously high dividend because their strategy is literally what I'm doing. They sell covered calls and they sell puts against MicroStrategy, and then they just provide the yield as a dividend back to the investors. It's super weird. I got to look at it more, but the only dividend I've ever seen. I've only been trading since 2020, but it's the only dividend stock I've ever seen that actually caught my attention. I was like, that seems pretty nice. It's like 10% a month or something. I don't know. I might have the figures wrong. I'll report back later if I get it all figured out. But yeah, these dividend guys are like, oh, could you, you got to get 2.5 million, 5 million, 10 million. Could you retire? And I'm just like, what? Those returns are just not even worth thinking about. And I'm being very conservative, just collecting 1% a week. If I wanted to go, at the money, that's 5% a week. Let's see, 3% would be about 3,600. So could sell the 1,300 strike. That would bake about $8,000 in call-away value. That scares me though, because MicroStrategy can pump 200 in a week, easy peasy. And so I try to, with these mining stocks, if I bake 10% in and the price goes up 20%, I really just don't care. I'll let those shares get called away, and I'll buy something cheaper. HUT is like my in case of emergency break glass. If it ever gets to a point where I can't afford HUT, then I'm in big trouble. I'll have to look at some of these other things. There's like IREN, and I can't remember some of the names of the other ones. I actually did look at IREN, and it was trading in increments of a nickel too. So I did a 180 and got the hell out of there. Especially on, if you're collecting $15 in premium, and I mean 15 cents times 100, and the mid price is 13, and you have to go all the way to 10 to get a fill, you're not getting $13, you're getting $10, and that's like 25% of your profit. You're getting screwed in the liquidity of the bid-ask spread. So I feel like I was kind of all over the place with this, but let me just kind of recap, I guess. If you've got MicroStrategy shares, you can either have enough extra uncapped shares, unlimited shares with no covered call, to peel off and cover these huge, we'll call them losses or whatever. Like if MicroStrategy pumps to 2,000, I got a couple of 70 grand, I would need 35 extra shares here. So to totally provide insurance at a $2,000 MicroStrategy target by next week, I would actually need an extra 35 shares here. But to cover this one, I would need 30 shares, basically for each of these. So to fully protect all 300 of my shares and their covered calls, I would actually need a whole entire 90 to 100 extra shares here to fully, quote unquote, insure all of these shares. So if you're a big baller and you've got 1,000 shares of MicroStrategy or something ridiculous, then it seems like about 100 shares for every 300 uncapped would be fairly safe to the point where if the price just pumps like way above your strike price, then you've got 25% of your shares uncapped, and you can just, you can sell those for a profit and not lose the shares that you would, and not have any of your shares actually get called away. Like what happened in my MicroStrategy account. And so let's just talk about the weaknesses. I've talked about them before, but when I had 100 shares of MicroStrategy, if I had literally just done nothing and sat on my hands and not sold covered calls against them and done my little strategy, then this account would be double what it is right now. Right now it's worth 64 grand, and it would be worth 120,000. So I'll end it there. Not financial advice, but absolutely have to be cautious with this. If I had 150 shares in this IRA, then I could have peeled off those 50 shares, and I'd still have 100. But as it was, like I think MicroStrategy was around 500 or 600, and I think I had like an extra 10% or something, but it wasn't anywhere near enough to maintain possession of this. However, if this works out okay, and I keep buying a share a week, then in 2 years I'll be back to 100 shares of MicroStrategy, plus whatever leaps I have over here, I suppose. So it might take me a while to claw my way back on this IRA, but those are the options. The strengths of selling covered calls against MicroStrategy is that the premium that you can get paid is very good, and you can use that premium to buy long calls. You can use that premium to buy shares. You can apparently quit your job and just live off of the premium, depending on how much you have and what your expenses are. But if you're not careful, it can also, MicroStrategy, it can also rip on you. Where's the chart? It can also just rip your face off. And if you're not carrying at least some unlimited upside, you could end up having all your shares get called away, like what happened in my IRA. So I think that's a good place to leave it. There are opportunities here, but there definitely are threats. And so make sure that you are taking precautions if you do not want to lose your, if you don't want to lose your shares. Oh, that was the other point I wanted to make. But if you own a stock and you've been holding it for a year, 2 years, or 5 years, and you're like, you know what, I kind of just want to get rid of this stock, well, you could set a limit sell, right? You could be like, okay, if MicroStrategy gets to 1,300, I'm going to sell it. I'm tired of holding it. But if MicroStrategy is still trading at 1,260 in 6 months, you're never going to sell it. However, if you're like, I'd be more than happy to sell my stock for 1,300, then you can get $3,800 a week until it gets to 1,300, the price that you want. So the person who sets a limit order gets nothing for the entire time it takes to get there. But if you sell a covered call at the price that you want to sell it for, you profit every single week until you get the price you want. So to me, when you want to sell a stock, if you just don't have to sell it immediately, but you've got some, gathering dust and you're like, I kind of want to get rid of it, what I would do is just pick the price, let's just not even talk about selling your MicroStrategy. But if you're like, you know what, I bought this Riot for $1,000 and I kind of just don't want it anymore. And, if you don't mind selling it at 10.50, they'll pay you $50 a week until it gets to 10.50. Or if you're like, you know what, I'll sell it for 11 and I'll pocket 10%. You know, if your cost basis is 10 and sell it for 11, and I'll just take a 10% profit on this. Well, guess what? They're going to pay you $40 every week if you sell a covered call for 11, and the price just stays at $10 for the next 6 weeks, well, or the next 10 weeks. Then they're going to pay you $400. To me, that's a no-brainer. Putting in a limit sell on stock makes no sense to me. I think, I mean, unless you just need to, if you just want to sell it now and repurpose it and do something else with it, of course, just get the hell out of the market. But if it's just sitting around and you're like, I don't know what to do with it, maybe I want to sell, I don't know, if it goes up to 11, maybe I'll sell. Well, don't put in a limit order and sit and watch it for 6 months. Sell a covered call against it every week until it gets to the price you want. That makes sense to me. So I think that's the last thing that I wanted to say. Protect your MicroStrategy at all costs. That's a warning for myself. I don't give financial advice. But I'm desperately trying to make sure that what happened in my IRA does not happen in my main account. So I hope that answered some questions and gave a little bit of an insight on how to sell covered calls in general and the particular risks for any stock, but MicroStrategy in particular. All right, leave it there. Be good, Joe.